Hello, everyone, and welcome to the podcast Magic is Real. I'm your host, Shannon. I am a psychic medium, and this is the podcast where we talk about all things metaphysical and spiritual with a focus on near death experiences and other spiritually transformative experiences, as well as spirit communication and more. I would just like to ask that if you do enjoy this podcast and it resonates with you, would you do me a favor and make sure you're subscribed if you want to be? And if nothing else, like this video, leave a comment below, even if it's just a small emoji. It really helps to tell the algorithm that this podcast is there and to share it with like minded souls. So I really appreciate your taking the time to do that. And thank you to all who have done that already. But most of all, I just thank you for being here with an open heart and mind. Today, I'm so happy to have with me Lewis the Medium, Lewis Harries. I have Lewis here because he is a budding young medium, but I'm not going to say that he's budding because he's already fully actualized. I have received a reading from him in advance. He was referred to me by Amy Bolesky, who many of you already may know. She's I would say, celebrity medium. I had her on the show, and she recommended Lewis, and I was curious about having a reading myself. Had one with him, and I can promise you this, I want to say kid, but he's really a very old soul. This young man has a beautiful gift and an innate bedside manner, and I can recommend him to all of you. So please schedule a reading with him. He's also affordable, which is really nice, and get in while you can while he's still affordable, because I know this guy is about to blow up. So, Lewis, thank you so much for joining me today on Magic is Real.
100%. Hello. I'm super, super, super excited. This is the first time I've ever done a podcast before, so I'm honored to do it with you. I'm super excited. I love your background as well. That's super cool.
Why don't we start by I'd love to know about your background, because you are if you don't mind me saying your age. I don't know why you would, but
Yeah.
you're 17 years old, and so I'm going to assume that you had this ability, this strong ability very early on, but I'd love to hear about the development of that. Also,
Mhm.
how were you raised? Is this something that is recognized within your family? And how were you raised spirituality wise?
100%. So, my first experience spiritual wise, I don't actually remember myself. My mum does, and she was the one that told me about it as I grew older. So, I was around 3 years old. And I began by getting chills now talking about it. I
Yeah.
began talking about a man that would stand in my bedroom doorway. Now, my parents at first thought that it was just imagination, all of that jazz. But as I grew older, the stories became more elaborate, more detailed, and much bigger, essentially. And so that's when they were like, okay, this is interesting. There's something slightly different. My dad, he was always pushed away from it. He wouldn't talk about it. He would kind of leave my mum to do the job, essentially. My mum would never ever say that it wasn't real. She would just say that it was something to not fear, which really, really, really helped me in understanding spirit and everything to do with that, because at that age, I had no idea what I was experiencing. I thought I was experiencing the same thing as everyone else until when I went into school, which was, how old was I when? When was that? Give me one sec. I was in primary school, which is elementary in the USA. And that was when I started speaking to classmates about these experiences, and they had no idea what I was talking about. And so it was very difficult when I'd say something and then I'd have people at that point saying what I'm saying isn't true. That's not correct. You're not experiencing that. That's your imagination. You're just a child. And so as I grew older with these experiences, especially in my very young years, which I am currently in, but even younger than I am now, there was a lot of, I don't want to say dark experiences, but I think because I didn't understand what it was, because you're not technically taught to understand. That's the thing. You're taught the exact opposite. You're taught to push it away, that it's fake, that it's not real, that you shouldn't understand it. And so that closes you off. Everyone has these feelings, everyone can feel these things. You just have to learn to understand how to feel them, essentially. I didn't have to learn how to feel them because I was never fully shut off from it. And so it was never fully forced down my throat when I would have people saying that it wasn't real. I'd then go and have more experiences that you just could not deny. For example, when I was 7 years old and I was in my old home because I moved house quite a few times. We went around a few different homes around one, two, around 4 times. I moved around 4 times in my childhood. And in the last home that I was living in, I think I was around 7 years old. And my bedroom was right at the front of the house, to the right if you were looking at the house from the outside. And I remember being in the hallway facing the front door, and there was a man there. This this man was the first spirit that I saw that was in full color, full detail. And I was like, interesting. I was more intrigued. I wasn't scared of that. And so I was like, okay, well, he's wearing these blue jeans. He's got this type of facial hair. This is the hair on his head. And it honestly just looked like a regular person, but with a tiny, tiny bit of like I want you to imagine like a cellophane plastic sheet put over a person. And so you can see the details, but it's slightly blurred out. And that's what it looked like. And there was a very slight glow all around the body. And so I went into the living room where my mum and my nan were both sat on the sofas. And I said, Mum, there's a man in the hallway. He was wearing blue jeans. He had this type of facial hair. This was the hair color he had essentially. And I was like, what is that? And my nan and my mum, they looked at each other and they were like, that's weird. And so my nan pulled out her mobile phone and she was scrolling through it and I was wondering what she was doing. And then she turned her phone around with a picture of, which I never met, but my granddad, who was passed away, in the exact same outfit that I described him in. He looked exactly the same as he showed up in the hallway. And at that point, that's when, especially my mum, she was like, okay, this isn't imagination. This is true. This is something. And so she's a firm believer in all things paranormal, spiritual, all of that. But she didn't know the extent of where I was going because my brothers, they were the opposite. I say they never had experiences. I have heard stories about when they were toddlers and they said that there was a man around them. So that's a thing too. But I think due to them being older than me especially and having people put it on them more and not having as many experiences, that's why they became more closed off from it. But because of the level that I was feeling, I could never fully shut it down or push it away because it was so obvious and permanent that it's just too much to ignore, essentially.
I have a friend who sees spirit. She's also very young, and she told me that when she sees spirit, it looks like an overlay. That's
Hmm.
how you describe it as well. It's sort of not completely translucent, but it's sort of like, yeah, an image over
100%.
an image, maybe a collage or something. So that's really interesting that you said that.
There's, I mean, oh my God, there's countless experiences growing up, but what we ended up doing is my mum would let me watch horror films, which I now know isn't the best thing for you,
Yeah.
obviously. But growing up, having these experiences that I could not understand, I was freaked out by what was happening around me. And so I ended up watching horror films to kind of adjust my mindset to not being afraid of it and almost numbing myself to it, if you see what I mean. And so,
Desensitizing yourself.
exactly. And so by doing that, that did help. It eventually kind of closed me off a tiny bit because it lowers your vibration and it brings your mentality down to that vibration of whatever the horror movie is projecting or movies and music in general. And so as I grew older and I became into like high school years, which is middle school, I believe, in the USA, I still had things happening. I still had experiences, but it wasn't as pronounced. It wasn't as out there. I remember being with an old friend and we were walking down the street and I saw a man on the opposite side of the road walking a dog and a woman spoke in my brain and I thought this is a random thought because I didn't understand what I was doing at that time still. And I said it out loud. I said, "Oh, his wife's passed." And my friend looked at me and she was like, "What do you mean?" And I go, "His wife passed." And she goes, she passed the other week." And I go, "Oh, that's interesting. I wonder what that is. That's really weird." And at that point, I was like, how can I learn to kind of keep these feelings and sensations up so they're just neutral but there and I can kind of use them when I want to? And so that led me into this stage where every few months I'd feel a lot more and then it would calm down again and then it would go up and down, up and down, up and down. It was never stable, but stability was what I wanted, especially with feeling. And so when I went to, in fact, my mum went to a psychic medium night one night, which was like a mediumship evening, in my hometown. And she came back and she went, "Oh, the medium said that granddad's around you, by the way." And I was like, interesting. Okay. And then she went, "There's another medium that's doing like a mediumship night in a few weeks. Do you want to go?" I was like, "Yeah, sure." I believed in it. I was excited. And so I decided to see if the way that I pick up information in my brain naturally, I didn't even fully understand what I was doing, if I could ask Granddad to do a specific thing at the mediumship night. And so we got into the car and we were driving there. We were meeting my aunt and my nan, who were also going to the show with us. And it was in like a little community. Sorry, that's my REM pod going off. That's because we're
Oh,
talking about him.
oh, I love that. Okay, excellent. So, yeah,
Can you walk away?
Lewis has a REM pod, which detects spirit activity.
I actually forgot it was on. I didn't
Let's
expect it to
keep it
go
on.
off. He's just standing there. That's my granddad. That's not gone off all day. All day. The only time that, oh, interesting. This will most likely be for one of my clients the next week because that's what happens. And so I get a
Yes.
lot of people popping in, especially for future clients, which I like to talk about as well because I write what I get down 24/7. So there's pages upon pages of notes in my room, absolutely everywhere. I
Yep.
like to put notes in my phone. I like to record a video saying who's here and then playing it to my client when it pops up, or even sharing clips from certain sessions where I said something, but it was actually for the other person, and I'll forward it on to them because
Yep.
there's a lot of connections that way as well, which is always super interesting. Like, I mean, I can just be having my morning coffee and then someone shows up. I can be in the shower and someone shows up in my brain. I can be, going about my day and there's always someone that's hanging around. And so it's really interesting to like find out who that is and who it's for, which I always find interesting is actually
Yeah.
learning about the spirits themselves, essentially.
When I had Amy Bileski on, the whole time I was sitting with her, I kept hearing Delilah, Delilah, Delilah. So finally, after we were done, I said, "Is there somebody named Delilah?" She said, "Oh, that's the grandmother of my last client that I just read today." And she came
Uh-huh.
in and I said, "Well, she's
Yeah.
still hanging around." And when you read me,
Hmm.
you had a friend of mine and you had right before me, you had another client. And,
Hmm.
or maybe not right before me, but before me, you had another client and you were giving evidence of somebody that was in a hospital and he didn't want to take medication and your client wasn't taking that information. Well, it turns out you were describing my friend so that when you
Yes.
did my reading, it made sense that my friend had been with you earlier. So that's why it's sometimes hard for us to tell because all we
Hmm.
know is somebody's here and someone might say, "Oh, is it for me?" I don't know. I just know that someone's here. Sometimes I can get a feeling it's for you, but we don't always know. And so that's why you keep a note of it. I'll often send myself an email so it's time stamped and say, "This is going to," just in case to prove that this happened and I knew it was going to happen. Here is, so I have evidence of it.
Oh, 100%. I mean, evidence. Because it's all well and good saying, "Oh, I'm getting this, this is what's happening," but where's the proof behind that?
Yeah,
Like
exactly.
anyone can say, "Oh, my spirit guide is named Josh." Do
Hmm.
you know what I mean? But how do you actually know that
Yep, yep.
without having that second person to approve it or give evidence for it? and understand it, which is why I mean, my belief is that every form of mediumship should be evidential anyway. Do you
Yeah,
know what I
well, it
mean?
has to be.
So when someone says, "Oh, I'm an evidential medium," why highlight that bit when mediumship as a whole, the entire
That's
point is
yeah.
to provide evidence. That's what mediumship is to show evidence and bring through messages from spirit. That is the whole point. Do you see
Mm-hmm.
what I mean? And
Yeah.
so that there needs to be a lot more focus in on not just evidence, but I almost feel like a lot of people close themselves off into a little box with spirituality and everything to do with that to the point where they don't understand and see the full true potential of what they can do in regards to their abilities and their feelings and their sensations, you name it. There's so much that you can do, and I'm constantly learning and trying to, I like to say, I like to investigate spirituality as a whole because I do little experiments, you could say,
Yeah.
on why certain things happen in this way and that way, because you'll notice there's a lot of patterns with mediumship, the way they communicate, messages, images. There's a lot more that we can learn and go into, even scientifically, that I believe is pulled back from an awful lot. And so I'm wanting to go into that a lot more because that's how you can truly understand it to the best of your ability.
Yeah. Now, just going back, because I know you started a story.
We got in the car and we were heading to the mediumship night,
Oh,
which
yes.
was planned a few weeks before. And in the car, I said in my brain, Grandad, if you can hear me, then just say that you're around me when I get to the show. And the meeting we went to, we'd never seen before. She'd never met any of my family. We don't know who she is. Um, and I just kept asking him to come forward because I wanted him to from my mum, essentially. And so
Yeah.
I kept asking him for her. And we got in. And I think I was the youngest person in that room. And so I sat down and I was sat next to my mum and my nan and my aunt was sat in front of us. And the medium comes in. She was a lovely lady and she explained how it works for her and what she does. And about halfway through the evening, she looks at me directly, really strangely. In fact, she gave me a really odd feeling, because she pulled almost like a curious face that she didn't do to anyone else, and I was like, "Oh, what is this?" And then she was like, "Your granddad's with you," and I was like, "Hmm, okay." And she said that he said to her, "Oh, of course I'll come through." And of course, that's my mind then going back to me in the car when I kept asking him in my brain, come through. And I wanted him to again for my mum so that she could have an interaction with him. And all of a sudden, I had the most overwhelming presence directly behind me. And I could feel someone's hand on my right shoulder. And I was shaking, shivery almost. My heart had never pumped so fast. And I knew that my granddad was quite literally behind me. And so I was looking at the medium and she goes, hmm. She pulls an odd face. She goes, you know, you're a medium, don't you? And I go, yeah. And she goes, but you're like, you can be really good at this. And I go, oh, okay. And she continues talking about my granddad, but just at the end of the evening when everyone was leaving, she walked past absolutely everyone. And this was a room of about 40 to 50 people-ish. She walked past everyone, but she came to me. She tapped me on my shoulder and she went, good luck with your journey. And then she walked off. And then as we were leaving, I was like, well, that proves to my family that I wasn't making any crap
Yeah.
up. So there we go. Even though they knew I wasn't, but that was like the confirmation for me that really threw me into I need to understand what I'm feeling more because I just need that initial confirmation to know that I wasn't insane,
Mm-hmm.
essentially, because it can make you feel crazy when you've got everyone around you saying, no, it's not a thing. It's not okay. It's not normal. And so after that night, I remember going home and I was trying to sleep, and I could feel my granddad in the room, but my feelings were like maximized. You know how I was talking about the ups and downs?
Yeah.
Well, it was just a continuous up from that point, so strong. And I was in the room and I was laying down and I was like, oh my God, he's in here. And then I felt, because I call them energy tingles, it almost feels like pins and needles, but goosebumps at the exact same time, going all over you. That's the best way to describe it, but you'll, if you know, you know. And so I was having that all over me and my legs, and I was like, so he sat on the bed, but he's the one that was here earlier at the mediumship evening. And then I was like, this is weird. And then for the next few nights, I'd be trying to go to sleep and I'd hear either a male or male and female voice just whisper my name in my ear as I was trying to sleep. Like, not, it wasn't even in my brain, it was directly in my ear. And so I'd even jump up and he'd be like, there's no one in here, even though there was. And so I was like, hmm. Anyway, I continued on and I eventually realized because at one point I was like, okay, the woman that's whispering in my ear just talked about how she liked her hair in rollers. She liked her hair this way. She kept stroking my hair when I was sat on the sofa. I could smell her perfume. I could see where she was. She was sat on a sofa watching TV. So I was like, I went downstairs and I went, Mum, who had an issue with their, what was it? I think it was their head, but they're talking about how they like their hair in rollers all the time, and she was obsessed with her hair, and she starts laughing, and she's like, "Well, that would be your nana's mum, so your grandmother." And I was like, "Interesting, but with the hair, what is that about?" And I'm pretty sure she had either a brain tumor or something very similar to that. From what I remember, I'll have to remind myself and double check. But I was like, okay, so she's around. That's who's whispering in my ear. That's the female. Then, of course, I figured out the male was my granddad. And then my nan came over one day. And we were all, me, my mum, and my nan was sat in the living room. And I had my sketch pad because I just told them how I've been trying to learn and understand what I'm doing, essentially. And they were like, okay, interesting. And I was like, let me just see if I can pick up on anything. Let's just see what happens. And so my nan was like, sure, let's go for it. And I was sat in the middle of the living room. I started scribbling on my page because it helps me to concentrate. And I could hear my grandmother, which was my nan's mum, in the room. And she was there and she was really excited. And then she shouts, and she showed me the scene from a movie called Mrs. Doubtfire, where she shouts the name Danny, essentially. And I'm like, weird, she just shouted Danny. And my mum and my nan freeze. And they look at each other and they're like, no way. Well, that was her son-in-law, Danny. And I was like, oh. But he's passed. And they were like, yes. So Danny was with my nana's mum, which was my grandmother. And so she was talking about how she's with him, how they're together, how she loved to cook, how she showed me around her house. She talked about having Danny's car, so he would always be at her home. And so that was like the very beginning of when I properly opened up. But I mean, I accidentally had things come through when I was even younger than that. When I was about 6 years old, 8 years old, I remember going to the community like swimming center, and there was someone in the pool, and I randomly got a vision of a old male, and he was talking about colorful socks. I was confused, and so I just said to this girl, I was like, I don't know what this is, but there's an old guy with you who has these colorful socks with him, and she was like, and her jaw dropped and she told me how her granddad, she got upset, her granddad had cancer, and they gave him these colorful fluffy socks when he was in hospital, but they had these patterns on. And so at that point, I was like, this is weird. I don't know what that is. And so I went about my day, as you do at 7 years old, not understanding 90% of things that you're experiencing, right? And so I was like, anyway, that's how far back it goes.
Yeah, yeah, I call them going back to when you said energy tingles, I call them spirit tingles. I have the whole
Uh-huh.
time. That's to me what they feel like when I shared that with my one of my mentors, Monica the medium. I said it's like that head massager thing that looks like a
Yes.
spider. And I said, to
Mhm.
me, it feels like that. She said, that's what I've always said. She said, that's
Mhm.
exactly what I always refer to. So not everyone will feel spirit the same way.
Mhm. Mhm.
So if you're practicing this or you are intuitive and you don't feel that, it doesn't mean you're doing it wrong. It's just for me, I don't know why it's always on my right side,
Mhm.
where I maybe that's just the way
Uh-huh.
my
Uh-huh.
neurons are set up in my brain where I always feel the spirit tingles down my
Uh-huh.
thigh,
Yeah.
like starting at the back of my head, going down my shoulder, down my right thigh. However, the other day, my roommate's dad came to me, and for the first time ever, I felt it on my left. No idea why.
Interesting. So there's always, literally always someone popping in or
Yeah,
popping out 24/7. It's like me and Amy. We do little Zoom investigations like I've told you about, which are
yeah.
always super fun. So we have all of our equipment set up. We have
Oh,
REM pods, we
fun.
have cat balls, EMF or K2 meters, whatever you want to call them. And so we almost, how do I say, we have our clients' loved ones step forward all the time. They're always hanging around. And so, for example, if they ever just randomly pop in, like months after I've done a session for somebody, and I have to go through like my client list of who was it, because I mean, there's people that have the same names. Do you know what I mean? So I'm like,
Yeah,
which one was it? Which one?
yeah.
And so I'm like, I hope I get the right one. And so I'll be like, why? Just to let you know, your loved one popped in my brain today. And then it turns out to be their birthday that day, or it turns out to be someone else's birthday or an anniversary of passing, or
Mm-hmm.
something big just happened, like pregnancy announcement or anything like that. And so that's a big thing as well, because they want to let them know that they're around on those times. And when I say
Yeah,
they're around all the time, I mean they are literally around all the time. So when you speak about them, you think of them, that's because they're around.
mm-hmm.
That is why. And so when they randomly pop into your brain, and you're like, oh, I miss my dad right now. Well, that's because he's right there.
Yeah.
That is what that feeling is. So you're missing the feeling, but you're actually experiencing that feeling in that indirect moment and you don't realize it. And so you pass it off as grief, but actually it's the feeling of spirit right with you.
Yeah, that's so cool. Yeah, like a couple days ago, I kept hearing Aunt Nan, Aunt Nan, Aunt Nan, and I'm like, this is somebody. And it was my client yesterday. It was she had an Aunt Nancy, but it ended up making perfect sense why her dad was mentioning that woman, and we're still waiting to find out if Nan has crossed, which she may have because he just kept talking about it. And there was a significant thing with her, but it was so cool. I'm like, I just keep hearing it over and over and over. So I would like to know from your perspective and what you understand and
Mhm.
what's been shared with you from the spirit world. How is it that we're doing this? Like, what is the deal? Are we why are we here in these bodies? Why why are we able to communicate with people that have their bodies have died, but their consciousness is still there?
Honestly, I mean, this is going to be really weird, but Earth isn't where we're meant to be, essentially. And so when people are like, oh, I wonder if aliens are ever going to be here, I really need you to listen to what I'm about to say and have a deep think about it. And that is that we are aliens. That is the truth. And from channeling and doing the work that I do, hell, for example, yes, it exists, not in the way that you think. It's not a burning pit of fire. For example, there's none of that, I promise you. In fact, all it feels like is a very mm, low, heavy feeling. For example, if you ever go to, what could I compare that feeling to? You watch a horror film, and then at the end of it, you feel that, ooh, that's a darker feeling. That's heavy. That is what that feels like because it's just a lower vibration, which isn't a bad thing. A lot of the time, it can just mean they passed in a heavier way. So people who pass with like drugs, alcohol, suicide, anything to do with that, they would be more middle because that's where, how do I explain it? That's because they made that decision. There's
This is where Lewis consults with his guides.
Okay, interesting. So you know how we're all animals, right? Absolutely all of us. We're animals, humans are animals, pigs are animals, dogs are animals, cats are. And you got to remember that every single one of those animals, including us, has a consciousness, right? And so, as far as before we're born and whilst we're born, when you seriously have a look at how we're created, it's two universes creating a rhythm and beat with music that are then forming a brand new universe inside another human that then gets released. Did you see what I mean? And so, this is like a bunch of little universes. Do you see my point? And so, with that, you've got to remember with collective consciousness, which is very much a thing 90%, I mean, I'd even go as far as saying 98% of your thoughts aren't even formed by you. And when people talk about collective consciousness, for example, it's more spirit giving you those feelings and those impressions and those thoughts. That's how we find out these new things. That's how we learn. That's how we experience life, right? And so when we go as far as why can we do what we do? Everyone can do what we do, but due to the way we have been essentially programmed, and including brainwashed, which is what has happened, not just by news, not by media, not by just the government, but by the entire social society of the entire planet, right? Because that's how they want us to understand. They want us to be limited with things like religion, which I want you to remember are words, thoughts, and feelings passed down through hundreds of years of only men, right? Who have then written them down, made up their own decisions, changed their opinions on them, and then re-updated what these supposed holy words are. And so they're able to use religion and control and fear base into keeping you into this tiny little box where that is your understanding. And so I want you to, instead of look at the Bible, look at all of these churches and going to see them and learning it from their point of view, which isn't actually their point of view. It's just been put on them and then they've accepted it because they've not taken the initiative into learning the truth and the full understanding. Because I want you to go and actually research. I want you to go and experience it for yourself. And if you can't fully confirm a fact, then it's not a fact. Do you see what I mean? If you can prove it multiple times, you see patterns within that, synchronicities even, you see them forming, then that's something. But if you're just accepting the words of someone that you don't fully know, you know what I mean? You can't make your full up mind, you can't make your full mind up on that. You need to learn from your own mind and your own self. And that is where you will find these answers, not only within you, but within the world. Like no one will ever know the full understanding of why we're here. I mean, I don't fully believe that we're meant to be on this planet in particular. I mean, we've got a, a planet not far from us that if it was a few inches closer, we could all burn and pass away instantly. You know what I mean? And we have to be inside to protect ourselves from said thing. If it wasn't for natural organisms like trees, we wouldn't be able to breathe. And even then, we have devices that help us with breathing and all sorts of things. If we were truly meant to be here, then that wouldn't necessarily be a thing. As far as speaking to spirit, again, we can all do it because when you pass, your body's useless. It's like a bag of potatoes, essentially. That's all it is. And to not freak you out, but to tell you how it truly is, we are possessed people. We are possessed creatures. We are like a possessed sack, essentially. Same thing with animals. And so when you're creating that universe and you're having a child, those two universes are coming together, creating a new universe, which then has a soul that enters it. And so when that's born into the world, it's like a skin, but with someone in it, which is the consciousness. Because say someone has their leg cut off in the war or in an accident, they're still the same person. If someone has their arms cut off, they're still the same person. That consciousness hasn't changed. So when does that finish? When does it get to that last point of this is still them? Do you see what I mean? And so what the answer to that is you fully break down the body all the way down. What you're left with is energy, which are protons, neutrons, and electrons. And that is energy, as we know from science, which has been proven multiple times, is that energy cannot be created nor destroyed. And so that's always still there. And so when you pass on, that energy hasn't gone anywhere. It's still here. It doesn't go to the other side. In my mind, it's directly here. And so what mediums do is they tune their brain like a TV channel or like a radio to the point where they can understand and read those frequencies and vibrations and then learn to translate them back into words through English.
That was fantastic in terms of an explanation and lines up perfectly with what I've learned from interviewing near death experiencers. From
Mhm.
doing this work, all I can say is what I feel, but I can't promise that what I feel is the ultimate truth. And none of the people I've interviewed have stayed on the other side in this lifetime. And
Yeah.
so we're never going to know exactly. But everything you said makes perfect sense down to what I believe hell is a projection of our own fears. Hell
Yes.
isn't a place that you are condemned to because of the actions that you have the crimes you've committed, even though we'd like to believe there's some kind of otherworldly justice.
You do some really bad things, you're gonna stay in that deeper vibration.
Yeah.
That's what's gonna happen. Like they will get, how do I say, it's not necessarily get what they deserve. They get what they put on themselves.
Yeah.
And again, but it is a projection 100%, but I've had lower vibrational humans come through for different reasons. Whether that's, taking someone's life or anything along those lines. If you go down that, they are going to have a heavier feeling because of what they did,
Yeah.
because they did that. And it's when you're in that really, really low vibrational state, you don't necessarily, I've not found that you leave it, especially when it's that low. You mostly stay there because that's where your mindset is still at.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's the same with, I mean, with middle vibrational people who have passed from, say, suicide, overdose, alcoholic, anything like that, when they're in a middle vibrational state, and they get to talk about how, and they get to the point where they're like, okay, yeah, that was a stupid thing to do. I shouldn't have done it. That wasn't what I was meant to do. That's when they can tend to improve. And that's what we like to call guides. And so we'll have them hanging around, which, by the way, come in just as quick as they leave. Okay. And that's what I need people to understand too, is they're not, it's you're gonna get guides that do hang around, but 99 but not 99.99999% of the time, you're not gonna know the names. I promise you. Or it'll
Yeah.
just be a name that has been put in your brain from spirit that you're now nicknaming them, essentially, because you're never going to be able to confirm it. Or it could even be a name that sounds very similar. So it's almost impossible to know for sure that guide's name unless it's someone that you're connected to in some sort and you actually know the person's name, if you see my point. And so that's a thing too. But that's again what we call our guides. And then as they learn and understand and help us through life, that's when they raise their vibration and get to be in a more heavenly state, which in my mind, through doing the work I do, is whatever they want it to be. Heaven is also a projection of one's feeling and mind and everything to do with that. So whenever I have loved ones in spirit come through for my clients or anyone around me, they often show me that their version of heaven is however they want it to be. I've had people who have shown it be right by the beach. I've had people show it in a cabin in the woods. It could be whatever you want it to be. And that comes along with animals. Animals have souls, all of them, absolutely all of them. That's also been proved through science too, through how our similar, what is the word? They did a study on, oh, what was it? because for the longest time, science didn't know if animals could feel pain. And then when they realized that, they were like, oh, well, humans do too. And so they started to understand how animals are actually extremely smart beings, like extremely. I mean, if pigs, for example, are extremely smart, but people don't understand or realize that. Okay, and yes, we're at the top of the so-called food chain, but thousands of years ago we wouldn't have been.
Right.
We wouldn't have been. Do you see what I mean? But as far as animals, they have souls too, and so they do end up being with you and your loved ones when everyone's passed as well. They often pop in from cats, dogs, lizards, bunny rabbits, horses, you name the animal, they can pop in and be around. And with mediumship, you can't get through what you've not felt, seen, experienced, or heard before, but what you can get is whatever is pretty damn close to you and your understanding. And so, what you've got to do is learn as much as you possibly can about life, about everything, which is why I love to watch medical documentaries so that I can learn about. I know if someone had a cannula in, if it was in the left arm, the right arm, if they had drips, how many drips there were, what type of medication was in them. Like I can tell the difference between morphine and a regular pain medication, comas, all of those different things. And so your loved ones are able to talk about if they went through the hospital, if they switched wards, what the doctors were like around them, what everyone was doing. All of those little details, the finer details, you're able to get if you just learn to understand more about life. And so I think that's where people fully close themselves off because they're like, oh, I feel this is this, but I want you to open that up. I don't want you to limit yourself to the point where you're like, no, this is where I'm comfortable. This is where I'm gonna stay. I want you to be uncomfortable and see how far you can go.
So, along the lines of Earth isn't necessarily where we are
Mhm.
supposed to be, it's one of many places that we can exist in.
Yeah.
This is one type of experience, and I have heard it said that this is the most dense, kind of difficult choice that that soul can make. Who's to say, right? But do we live in a simulation? Do we live in a matrix?
Do you know what? Technically, but not in the way that people imagine that to be. For example, when I say that we're not meant to truly be here, this is an experience for us. Our true form is spirit outside a body. You know what I mean? And so we are possessing a body, which is a universe, okay? And so when you really look at the bigger picture, and our true form is being a spirit outside a body where we're not limited by seeing the nose in front of our eyes or seeing the eyelashes whilst being in this human body and looking out of our human body and having this human experience, when you're not limited by that, you're you as a whole. When you're in this experience, it's more, there's a reason why we are here. Why? That is obviously the big question. There's a reason behind it. Whether some people believe it's because we need to learn things or we need to understand certain things. There's a lot of different ways to look at it, but again, we won't fully know why with that, which is why it's so important to not limit yourself with the way of thinking, not only through religion, but spirituality in a whole also has a lot of limiting aspects. I'll say that. And it's a bit of a topic that people don't go into enough in my mind is where did we get these beliefs from with spirituality? Why can't we also question spirituality too? It should be, and that is how you learn, that is how you expand. But no, people are limiting their self to the point where this is the way it's meant to be. This is what's happened. But that's just one form of spirituality because spirituality is a belief, but it's also an experience that can be proven through certain ways and experiments. And so when people limit themselves to that one point of view, all they're doing is shutting themselves off from the full perspective of it, which is that this isn't even us. What's
Mhm.
us is inside of us, which is why when love gets accounted for, that's why you feel warm inside, not from the outside, because you are inside and you are having those feelings from inside of you. And so our true self is outside of our body, which is why after you pass, when you're not actually dead, because even when you're alive in this physical body, you're both dead and alive, if you think about it. Because when your body is dead, people still see spirit as something different, which I can't see that. People think that spirit is something completely different to a human being, when in fact spirit is what an actual human is.
Yeah. From having done this work and communicating with spirit the way that we do, you do, what is it that you think spirit wants us to know most?
There's an overwhelming feeling every time, and this is why they pop in just before a session, weeks before a session, any time beforehand. The big reason why your loved ones come through way before the connection is meant to be. It's because of the way that everyone's being programmed to be shut off from it. And so what your loved ones will do is try and push it so much onto the medium that they are actually around, which is why they pull through evidence to talk about how they're around, because your loved ones want you to know they're around just as much as you want to. There's no difference there. You're like, well, do they miss me? No, they do not, because they're with you. But what they want is for you to know they're around just as much as you want to know that they're around. And so when you finally understand that and you understand how to communicate with these feelings, you'll meet in the middle and you'll both be like, oh, there's no gap. And your loved ones know that, but what you need to know is that there isn't a gap. And just because you've been programmed a certain way doesn't mean that you have to listen to that way. Learn from your own experience, not from the mind and thoughts of others. That's super important because if you listen to absolutely everything everyone told you, life wouldn't be great. I promise you that. If you listen to everything the news told you, life wouldn't be great. If you listen to everything even teachers told you, life wouldn't be great. If you listen through the mindset of others, you're never going to learn the truth and the possibilities through your own experience and lens.
That's great insight. I want to thank you so much, Lewis Harries, for joining me today from the UK during a heat wave in which you've been battling with profuse sweating and having to sort of turn your fan on and off during our interview. But thank you so much for sweltering through this. It's so wonderful to know you and to now call you a friend. And where can we reach you? I'm going to have a link below, but in case somebody is visually impaired, where can we reach
100%.
you?
So my website is www.lewismedium.uk, or you can find me on Instagram and TikTok by the same username, which is Lewis the Medium. Please be aware that there's a lot of accounts claiming to be me. The only account of mine is literally just Lewis the Medium. The one on TikTok has roughly 17,000 followers currently. The one on Instagram is verified as well as Facebook is verified. So please make sure to know I will never message you. I will never DM to reach out, but the only way to book a session is through my website.
Thank you. And that is LEWIS, themedium.uk. Thank you so much, Lewis. You are such a gift to this world and such a
Thank you.
special, as I say, young man. I sound like a grandmother, but you are like a son. You are like a son
Oh,
to me,
thank you.
who I've just met, but I love all the same. So thank you again for being here and sharing your wisdom and your insights. Please stay cool and be well.